it was that I wanted to be white. I didn't want to be black. I wanted to have hair like my best friends had, long, shiny hair. That you could put in pigtails, that you could put in plaits, that you could put ribbons in. You couldn't do that with my hair. I wanted to be white. I didn't want to get darker in the summer. I wanted to be light. I wanted to be a white person. And I couldn't, no matter how much I wanted that, no matter how much I made myself palatable, no matter what dress I wore, I always was the odd one out because there were no other people that looked like me in any of the communities that I was involved in.
You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper. Welcome back to another episode of My Rejection Story. Today, I am joined by Sabrina Pace-Humphreys. She is a British ultra runner, author of Black Sheep, and co-founder of Black Trail Runners, a charity working to diversify the UK's outdoor and trail running spaces. Sabrina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on. It's great to be here today.
It is great to have you. So I am going to ask you a question that I often ask guests, and that is, what is your earliest memory of rejection?
Oh my goodness. I think actually I was speaking to a friend about this the other day, and I don't remember much from my childhood at all. It was quite chaotic, my childhood. But the earliest rejection that I remember, I must have been, I was still in a cot, and I remember crying because I was afraid of the dark, and standing up holding the side of my cot. And this is such an early memory, but it really left an impact on me. And I remember my father coming into the room and kind of throwing me back into the cot and saying shut up, and leaving me in the dark. And yeah, that is my earliest memory that I have of wanting help and being rejected. And I was speaking to a friend about it the other day. I don't remember much of my childhood at all. As I said, it was quite chaotic. I describe growing up in a single parent family in Black Sheep, my first book. But that is the earliest memory that I have of being rejected, which is as a small child.
Wow. Two things. I know that not having a lot of childhood memories can directly be tied to trauma, but also what a young memory and what a devastating memory. But you remember being in the cot.
Yeah.
I know in books I've read on trauma, Basil van der Kolk, A Body Keeps the Score, the younger you are, so that age, kind of the more long lasting that effect of trauma can be later in life. So I'm sorry that happened to you at that such a vulnerable age.
It's funny, isn't it? I'm 48 now, and I as I say, a lot of my childhood memories I don't recall, for reasons of trauma and kind of that kind of self-protection, I think, obviously, that's happening from a cognitive point of view, but that is a memory I remember very vividly. And I remember it as if it were yesterday. And it's such a shame, I think, that that my earliest memory is of that, because actually that kind of that feeling of rejection has impacted on so much of my life across, from members of the family, friends, etc. So the body does keep the score, definitely.
Yeah. And I know from reading some of your book and also doing a little bit of research into your story that your father subsequently left your mom and you, and that you grew up mixed race in a white, small British town where there were no people of color. How did that impact, I guess, any rejection you faced and maybe your relationship with rejection?
I think that it absolutely impacted my everyday lived experience of as a child, as a teenager, as a young woman. I think that I grew up, my father is black and my mother is white, and I have a sister. And my sister is, for those listeners who may not kind of understand this, my sister is white presenting, meaning that if you looked at my sister, you would not be able to tell that she had a father who was black. She's very pale. She's very white features. Whereas you look at me and you know that, you know, I am biracial, I am mixed race, I am you know, what I say is, you know, I'm a black mixed race woman, because my lived experience has shown me that that is how I am perceived by the world, and that has been my lived experience. So growing up, moving to a very small Cotswold market town in the southwest of England, when I was 3, I was the only black girl in the town, and therefore I stood out like a sore thumb because of the texture of my hair. My mother was white. She didn't have any family or friends or know of any hairdressers that knew how to handle my hair. So my mother would cut it. My mother would style it. And the only reference she had as a reference point was the Jackson 5. So all of my school photos are of me with a massive afro, which was shoddily cut. And, you know, I'm extremely short-sighted. So and we were very low poverty. We're a very low income family. We relied on the state for handouts, food banks before food banks were a thing. So all of these intersections that I inhabited meant that rejection was a daily part of life. I was rejected by my peers. I was racially abused, physically, mentally abused day to day. The outdoors wasn't a safe space for me to be. I was incredibly shy as a child, not because I didn't want to go out and play, not because I didn't want to mingle, because it was an unsafe space for me to be, because it was a place where children, adults could other me, could point me out, could try and touch my hair, could comment on the darkness of my skin, could comment on my nose, could all of those things that made me different were used against me as a way to isolate me, as a way to reject me. And that was my experience growing up. That was the predominant thing, factor in every day. And that, you know, it continues to a point until this day, and it's why I do the work that I do within the trail running space. But it's certainly colored my experience as a child and as a teenage girl trying to find her way in the world. And that it's, you know, it's taken a lot of working through, a lot of therapy in order to accept what happened to me, but also use it now for the work that I do.
Yeah. Okay, so firstly, like, how awful, and I'm so sorry for little Sabrina and having to navigate a town and a community that was so hostile to you for something as simple as how you look. What did that do to your identity? I mean, how did you make sense of it if you had to zoom back to your brain when you were maybe 10 years old? I'm sure it changed as you entered adolescence, but how do you make sense of being othered and treated in a hostile way, and also feeling like you're the only one that's different?
I just think I always felt like an outsider. I always felt that no one really understood what it was like to inhabit a body that didn't look like everyone else's. And therefore, I wanted to look different. That was the predominant thought as a young girl, I would say kind of 11 and under, at primary school. But I wanted to be white. I didn't want to be black. I wanted to have hair like my best friends had, long, shiny hair. That you could put in pigtails, that you could put in plaits, that you could put ribbons in. You couldn't do that with my hair. I wanted to be white. I didn't want I didn't want to get darker in the summer. I wanted to be light. I wanted to be a white person. And I couldn't, no matter how much I wanted that, no matter how much I made myself palatable, no matter what dress I wore, I always was the odd one out because there were no other people that looked like me in any of the communities that I was involved in. And I think that it was just a feeling of isolation, a feeling of wanting so badly to be in a community or see someone that would see you for who you were and not use it as a way to hurt you. I think I was always seeking for people who look like me. But I live in a Cotswold market town. The people that looked like me, the only place I saw those were on the television, or they were in bigger cities that we could never afford to go to, like London. I didn't have any family. My father was a foster child. So my father was put into foster care when he was a baby. So we didn't have access to our black hands, that black kind of side of our family, our Ghanaian side of the family. And that's really hard. And it's also doubly hard when your own father is not around either to share with you, for you to share with them. So it was a very isolating, lonely place to be.
As you're talking, the next question that I want to ask you is, were you actively seeking belonging? And if you were, what did that look like in a space where, your dad's not around and your sister who shares your DNA is more white passing, so she isn't necessarily going through the same struggles that you're going through. Were you trying to belong, and what did that look like? I mean, I know you mentioned you wanted to be white, you wanted to have long straight hair.
I think trying to belong just looked like really trying to make myself more palatable. And to be more palatable, it was to try via my manners, via being better at school, via really playing to my strengths educationally, really seeking acceptance and approval via the other things that I had that weren't about what I looked like. It's what I could do. So, I was really great at handwriting. I was quite an intelligent child, did well at school. I was very polite. So I would seek to overachieve in the areas that would feel as if I was accepted there, that somehow that would translate to be me being accepted for the color of my skin. But as we always find, ultimately it's an inside job. So no matter how much praise I would get from educational institutions, teachers, it would never override the sense of isolation when I was outside of those spaces because of the racial abuse that I was experiencing. So my seeking to belong always felt very short-lived. So I would seek that in, the magazines that I read, the people that I saw on television, I was like, they look like me. They're my people. Maybe one day I will be able to earn enough money, or I will have more money that I'm able to go to London, or I'm able to go to Birmingham, or I'm able to go to a salon that it specializes in my Afro hair. That was always the ultimate goal, is to find a community of people that not just looked like me, but from a social perspective, understood the social impact that we experience as people of color navigate in the world.
You mentioned, this was a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned that you really wanted to feel seen. You wanted someone who saw the full you. And so as you're talking about all these things you did to try assimilate or seek the acceptances of those around you, do you remember the point where you recognized that this was actually not fulfilling? This was not making you feel better, trying to seek
I
approval and
think,
acceptance?
yeah, I mean, I think it's an ongoing journey, if I'm being really honest. I think that for me as a woman navigating this world, I think that the spaces in which I operate and have always operated, whether it's professionally, personally, from a social perspective, from a friendship perspective, I think that I realized, probably kind of a lot later in the day, that actually me seeking the approval from other people was never going to truly make me happy. It had to be an inside job. And still to this day, I defy anyone that's been through, any amount of therapy to say that finally they're healed. I think that, you have good days and bad days. And I think that on the good days, they're good. And on the bad days, you find yourself falling into that trap of, oh, well, if they like me, I'll like myself. If they like what I'm doing, if they give me praise, etc. So I think that for me as a mother of 4 and a grandmother of 3 now, it's really important for me to remind myself on the daily that no one else's opinion is any of my business. And that's something that I say to myself day in, day out, is that if the only measure of me being seen or being accepted is through the eyes, ears of others, then I'm never going to truly be happy. And I think that really only came to me in my 40s. I think that I spent a long time seeking fulfillment and seeking approval from the wrong people in the wrong positions that I believed knew so much more than I did. And actually, when they were stripped back, they knew much less than I did. And I think that realization, really kind of came to fruition kind of when I hit my 40th decade. Yeah, my 40th, my 40s.
Yeah, your 40s. So, seeking approval, realizing that that's never going to make you happy and it's an inside job. It's a journey that I think many people go on, but it's far harder. It's far harder to discover that than it is to hear it and say it. So in your 40s, do you have any specific memories where it really, like, you felt like maybe it really landed for the first time that this is going to be an inside job?
I think that I turned 40 in 2018, and I got sober in 2016. So I'm a recovering alcoholic. I remember when I went into recovery, I was in a 12-step program. That my sponsor said to me, Sabrina, I was kind of early days in sobriety, and I knew that my 40th birthday was coming, and I knew that the old way that I would have celebrated was not going to work with me being sober. And therefore, as I talk about within Black Sheep, I decided that I wanted to do something when I was 40 that would really be a stake in the ground, in the sense that I made it to 40. There were so many years that, as I talk about in my book, suicidal ideation, addiction, where society felt that society put perceptions on me and stereotypes on me that I had to fight against. And I did fight against and prove them wrong. But I think that I trained for a race in the desert called the Marathon des Sables, which is a desert ultramarathon in the Sahara Desert. And I remember standing on the start line there after 18 months of training and having been through so much, managing training, running a business, being a mother of 4. It was a lot. And I stood on the start line and I looked around, and again, it was, there weren't many people of color there at all. And I remember just being really proud of myself that I had got there when so many hundreds of thousands of other people would never. Sorry, I've got a fly in my eye. But so many other people would never, ever have. This fly is just hunting me. But so many other people would never, ever have made it there. And I was there, and I was stood there, and I was so proud of myself. And that was a feeling that had been so evasive to me over the years, that feeling of real pride in the work that I had done, and no one else telling me how good I was, but me knowing how good I was. And I think that it was transformational for me, because I realized that I didn't need that external approval to do these things, that actually it was all inside me, and that I had these skills that I could use that emanated from all the crap that I had been through up until that point, that it gave me a very deep well of resilience to be able to push through and do really hard things. And I think that was the catalyst. I think that experience in my 40s, training for, and then in my 40th year, was the catalyst for change.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on getting sober. Congratulations on the many, many marathons you've run. And
Thank you.
that catalyst, or recognizing that you have done hard things, you can do hard things, and then having that kind of inner resilience to know that you're going to operate from a space of you and what you want, and no longer externalizing and rooting all your value in others is a powerful point to get to. And as you were talking, it made me think of something that I think you wrote in your book, and I've heard you talk about, which is the hardest mile is the first mile. And so that's in reference to running, doing that first mile. But I think it's, and also so many other things like getting sober, or putting yourself first for the first time, doing something that's radically new, but also rooted in yourself and your own identity. And so the question I want to ask you is, for anyone listening who let's take it back a step. When you made the decision to put yourself first, that first decision, which I think it's a muscle and it gets a little bit easier over time, do you remember what the catalyst was that led you to become sober, or when your GP told you to take up running when you had postnatal depression? It's easier said than done. Putting yourself first is easier said than done, but actually putting that into action. I'm curious if you remember kind of what clicked that made you decide.
I think I wanted to live. I think I wanted to live. I didn't just want to exist in this world. When I got sober, the catalyst for me going to my first meeting, picking up the phone, was my husband telling me that, if I didn't do something about my alcoholism, that I would need to leave the family home, that, he couldn't have me around the children, that he thought I was going to kill myself, the way that I was drinking. And my addiction took me to very, very, very dark places. And I didn't know it right then, but in picking up the phone, I made a decision to live. And it's the same with running. When I was experiencing severe postnatal depression in 2009 after the birth of my fourth child, again, that suicidal ideation, I was so mentally ill that, those thoughts were with me daily. And had I not gone to the doctors, had the doctor not diagnosed me as postnatally depressed and not suggested I try jogging, and then a couple of days later feeling so mentally ill, but again, part of me wanting to live was what made me get out the door. The unaliving thoughts were daily, and something in that day spoke to me and said, we want to live, try this thing. So I think that's the catalyst for the largest decisions in my life that I have made, is knowing that I want to live. And I don't want to live a life where every decision that I made is based upon the perceptions of others. I don't want to live a life where I'm so unhappy. My soul is we in AA we talk about these dark nights of the soul, and I felt as though for so many years I was living with a hole in my soul. That hole had been born out of years and years and years of abuse and chaos in my family and addiction, and witnessing things as a child and as a young woman, a young adult, that no child should witness. And that bore a hole in my soul that just got bigger. And every time I would want to numb or I want to fill it, I would fill it with the wrong things, alcohol being my drug of choice. But, connection is the opposite of addiction, and all I was seeking was that belonging and that connection, but more so with myself. And I think every time I make a decision to live, it's connecting back in with myself and saying, you deserve to live. You deserve to live a happy, joyous and free life that isn't dependent upon what others think of you. So that's where those two big decisions, and every big decision in my life comes from, is me deciding that I want to live and that I deserve to live and I deserve to be happy.
Yeah, I like that you repeated I wanted to live multiple times, because it's resonance and it's powerful. And what I'm curious about, and what kind of, as you're talking about wanting to not just survive, you want to thrive, like you want to live on purpose. So many people I know who struggle with addiction have that feeling of like, I want this to end, I want to stop, I want to live, but I don't know. It goes back to that first mile. Like, I don't think I have it in me to do everything that is needed to do, that I need to do in order to be sober, or end whatever it is that they have been doing, whatever their drug of choice has been. And so it's like, maybe one day I'll have the time and the capacity, because it's hard. I mean, you know better than anyone. Like, if you are in survival mode, it's not always easy to get out of that. It's not really easy to like quit your job or get the support that you would need. So for anyone listening who doesn't know how to do that first mile, how did you do it? And maybe, we could start there.
I accepted help. I set aside my fear and I reached out for help. And ultimately, in reaching out for help via that telephone call first in 2016 and speaking to another alcoholic who absolutely understood when I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to live without this. I don't know how to function. I'm losing everything. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can do it. Having someone there that says, I know, I see you, I hear you, I've been you, I am you, and I want to help you. Like being seen, whether it's as an addict, an alcoholic, a woman of color, being someone really seeing you and being able to speak your story back to you is life changing. It changes your life. It gives you the hope, that small glimmer of hope that you can live and that you can live as an alcoholic without consuming alcohol every day. Like I could not imagine living a life that didn't include alcohol. That just wasn't I didn't think it was an option for me. And it took me to hear, as many people that find recovery do and reach out for help, rock bottom. It was only when I was at rock bottom, there was nowhere else for me to go other than to die. And again, that glimmer of, but I really want to live, but I don't know how to. So that is that connection when it comes to addictions. Connection is the polar opposite to addiction. We're seeking connection and we think that we can find that connection through sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be. But actually it comes in the connection. And I think that's the power of 12-step programs. I mean, I'm in a 12-step program, being around other people who have been there, who get it, who you don't have to explain it all to, because they know how it feels when you're like those early days and your thoughts are consumed by how am I going to get through the day. And it was, I think that first mile, making the decision to step out the door, the physical door or the mental door, often it comes with asking for help. Whether that help is a friend you know or a friend that you don't, an organization you know, an organization you don't, but it comes from seeking some form of connection that allows you to feel seen. That's game changing.
Asking for help and seeking a form of connection that allows you to be seen. If you could go back and talk to Sabrina in her darkest days, so when you were in the throes of addiction and didn't see a way out, in the throes of suicide ideation, what would you say to that version of her?
Oh, gosh. I think back to one of my darkest episodes. I think I would just tell her, like, you are enough. Like, you are loved. And you are enough, and you have always been enough. And if I could take the learning from now, it will just be like, just start now where you are. You know, it's the name of my second book I bought out in January is called Start Where You Are. Like, all that has been past has passed. The future's not written yet. What can we do today to start to make that change? And for her, it would have been for me to say to her, you're enough. Know this. You've got nothing to prove to anyone in this craziness that you find yourself in, this hamster wheel. You're enough. Take all of that away and you'll still be loved. I think it's that.
That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing. You are enough. My second to last question is for anyone listening who feels like maybe they're at the darkest days. They need to find out that they're enough. They need to ask for help. Would you recommend any kind of starting point for them if they are wondering how to get started on their own healing journey?
I think for me, as part of that journey that I took in 2016, before I even called my 12-step group, I called the Samaritans here in the UK. We have a helpline, and it's manned by volunteers. I just needed to speak to someone. I just needed to externalize what I was feeling internally. So what I would say to them is, whether it is an anonymous person on the end of a phone line, whether it is someone online, whether it is an email address that you've like, take that first step in reaching out. And I know how hard it is, because ultimately your head tells you they don't care, no one cares, no one's going to get back to you, no one's going to. And that's why I think things like the Samaritans in the UK, which is, a manned phone line, can be a great first point of call across the board. You don't need to be an addict. They're just there for people who need someone to talk to, just need some help and maybe some signposting. So, communication and finding a vessel, finding someone, something in order to feel like you're enough, you feel like you're loved, is super important. So I would use the free resources that are out there that are set up for people who are at that jumping point, They're there. They're charities. That's what they're there for.
I will share some free helplines in the show notes for some different countries, including Samaritans for the UK. Sabrina, thank you for going so deep in such a short episode. There's so much that we didn't touch on, and you have a whole journey that led to running, and you being kind of, or facing some kinds of rejections within the running community and starting your own charity. So I would love you to share with the audience just a little bit about you and your work, and if they're interested in exploring further, reading your books, or connecting with you and your work, could you share just a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So today, at the grand old age of 48, I'm a mother of 4 and grandmother of 3. I'm a social justice advocate. So I fight day in, day out via public speaking, via my books, via the work that I do, in order to create more equity within the world, especially for people of Black heritage in the outdoors. And because I believe outdoor spaces should be a space for all, no matter what colour, creed you are. So a lot of my work is in addressing the barriers to access for people of the global majority in outdoor spaces, because outdoor spaces can be healing. The science shows that connection to nature is so important for mental health and well-being. So a lot of the work that I do lies in public speaking, whether it is within companies or whether it is to large audiences. And also, the consultancy work that I do around social impact, social cohesion, and using the outdoors as the landscape for that. It's very, very important to me. I think that the world that I want to see, I want to play a part in creating, is a world where we use movement, we use nature, we use environment in order to bring communities together rather than to rip them apart. As I said, I have my first book, Black Sheep, is a memoir in which I talk about a lot of the subjects we've discussed in this podcast episode. But ultimately, my passion is ultra running. So I run hundreds of miles at a time for fun, and I love trail running, which is running in nature, off road. My second book, which was out earlier this year, is called Start Where You Are, The Beginner's Guide to Running 5K for Women, because I'm seeing that a lot of women, through fears around safety, around how to do it, around finding community, want to access running, want to try running, but don't know the who, why, where, or how. So I used all of my experience and wrote a book for those women to experience what I experience and have me kind of virtually cheerlead them on that. So that was out in January, and is something that I'm talking about a lot at the moment, in between everything else. But But yeah, I really am fortunate. I think through everything that I've been through, people say to me, "Oh, would you change anything?" And now, of course, there are elements of my life that I would change. One of my earliest memories not being kind of, rejected. But actually, it's given me a skill set and a stories that I can tell that I think are beneficial to across the board, and are inspiring and can incite change. So yeah, I'm a change maker. That's what I do.
You are definitely a change maker, and I think that this episode alone will change people's lives, and I highly recommend going and exploring your work further to all of the listeners, and everything will be linked in the show notes. I like what
Thank
you
you.
said about building a world where we use movements and nature to bring communities together instead of apart. It's a lovely mission. Thank you so much for joining for an episode of My Rejection Story, Sabrina.
No problem. Thanks so much for asking me.
You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper.